Okay, welcome everyone to the Pro Trade Room Plus. I also want to welcome everyone who's watching us on YouTube. This is one of our streams of the week. We're here for Core PPI. My name is Lee Goldstein, Trading Director at 10 Minute Trades. Please remember that all the trades we discuss are for educational purposes. I'm not a financial advisor. It is possible to lose money trading futures. Okay, so we are here for Core PPI, and it is trading with unemployment. Now, that's the news that we're expecting. So if we get similar news to yesterday, we should have a nice move. PPI has honestly been a trap trade forever. I mean, that's what this trade has been. We did test the YM, and there is a setup for the YM, and a couple of the months didn't test that great at a 4, and 2 of them tested pretty well. There are some issues today that I think are possibly going to make this trade a little bit more challenging. And that is, first off, that is the fact that gold has really been selling off today. It's down, it's up a little bit since 20 minutes ago or so, but it has been selling off pretty significantly all morning. Um, it just creates more risk for the trade when it's near the lows like it is. Although it's nice that it has pulled off $5. So we'll see what it does if it keeps pulling away from the low. That, in my opinion, does make the trade a little bit less risky. Um, let's take a look at the DMM, the Daily Trade Report. I think there's a lot of risk on this report today. I think that's the reality. If I know that quite a few people had good results on CPI. PPI is definitely tougher as a breakout. There's been quite a few whips. If we get a, obviously, if we get a good news result and it's creates a good breakout, then of course it'll be a good result for breakouts. The worry is if it's a burst breakout and it blows through, the worry is if it blows through the trap. If it's a great news result, inflation's down, and it doesn't reverse, or it just goes so far it blows through the trap. So it definitely feels like there's extra risk on the trap trade today. Just in general, I'm being truthful, I have a lot of feelings of risk on this report. The thing that works in its favor is that when you look at the spike sheet, what is the spike sheet? The spike sheet is the sheet that we create to determine if we think the trap trade is safe by looking at the way the market spiked at the time the news was released. In other words, you don't want to get blown out of your positions instantly when there's a large burst. Okay. So the spike sheet gives us the settings that can be safe. So last month, it spiked 75 ticks. We have a 70 tier plus a stop of 25. That's a 95 tick zone of safety. We've never blown through the zone of safety going back to 2 Januaries. Last January and then another year. So you have to think that our trap trade settings would be safe. This trade, I mean, Robbie, you could trade anything, but we don't have NQ tests, and I don't have an NQ test, so I can't tell you what's going to happen on the NQ, what we'd recommend, nothing. I don't have any recommendations at all for the NQ. The only thing I can tell you is that every instrument will probably move on this report. But, we do a certain amount of testing. It's impossible to test every instrument. Liquidity, you just never know, Roz, if there's going to be a liquidity problem. You don't know. There's no way to predict if people are going to get filled, not going to get filled. My gut feeling is to trade this as if it's going to be a lot of risk, trade small, maybe micros. If you trade the trap trade with a gold micro, you could even increase the tiers to 80, the stop to 30 if you wanted to. I think there's a lot of risk. I just think there's a lot of risk on this report. We did not love breakouts on this report. It has not been a great breakout, and it's also married with unemployment, and it often trades with unemployment, um, or retail or something big. The yellows are when it trades with other large reports. And even with other large reports, we've still had big spikes, but we survived them and pretty good reversals. I do want to be honest. I'm definitely worried today. If the news is excellent, I do worry that the trap trade could fail. So, you could trade one contract on the YM. Let me show you. The YM testing is not as good on this report as it was on CPI. It's just not, doesn't trade as well, doesn't go as far. Um, it just is not as good. So I think there's a lot of risk on this report. Gold breakouts, they work occasionally, but they also whip on this report. So look, I'm not trying to talk everybody out of trading the report. The trap trade has worked over and over and over on this report. So I'm just trying to debate where I want to trade. Here's how I would set up the trap trade if you're going to take it. Now, you could just trade one tier on the trap trade if you want to reduce your risk. Okay. And it might not be a bad way to do it. So, first off, I'm going to label the trap trade trap GC. Okay. Um, if you were just going to trade one tier, then you would do tier one at 70, and the stop would be 25 ticks. That's how you would trade the trap trade with one tier. The time of the event would be 8:30, and the prep seconds would be 5. Okay. That's how you would do it. If there's not a very big move, then what's the worst that happens? You don't get filled. It's not the end of the world if you don't get filled on a very risky report. Okay. There's no question it's a very risky report. So that's one way to mitigate your risk. The YM, now the testing I did, the winning trades did not require a 70 tick stop. So if you notice, the YM has a big stop, 70 ticks. That's $350 per contract. That's a lot. If you trade MYM, I'd probably go to a 40 tick bracket because of what we saw yesterday, that the MYM moved more than the YM. Although very honestly, on this particular report, it's not the bracket that fails. It's really, if there's a whipsaw, the bracket's not going to save you. And that's what I saw were a couple of whipsaws. The other thing you could do is trade one contract on the regular YM and just go for a target of 25 ticks with a stop of 40. It's not a great risk to reward on the YM. It just isn't. It's not a great risk to reward on the YM. And honestly, because of the testing, it didn't really fill me with a great sense. Like the CPI testing was great. I was really looking forward to the report. We need a perfect move, a good offset. Well, it doesn't matter what the news is. We just need a good, solid move in one direction for the breakouts to work properly on this trade. So I think what I'm going to do is trade the trap in my regular account because it's been working. So I've got a tier of 55, a tier of 70, 8:30 is the time of activation. And the prep is 5 seconds. All right, the stop is 25. So our zone of safety is 95 ticks. Gold goes 100 ticks, then I would get stopped out. That's the trap setup. Anybody have any questions about the trap trade setup? Now you can trade, like I said, you could trade micros on the trap trade. With micro gold, MGC, I would probably keep the same settings. I think the same settings. You could go 80 on the outer tier if you wanted to. And then what I'm going to do is I tested my Top Step account is finished. It's not working properly. I can't get them to respond to me properly. I don't know what the problem is, but they're not responding. They're responding as if I'm crazy. I take a simple trade short and it calculates as if it was long as a loss. Makes no sense. On our Buellnox account, okay, on the trap trade, to put the parameters in, and look, I'm not dying to lose money either. We worked hard to get some money back yesterday, and my gut feeling is I'm definitely concerned about the trap. I mean, maybe I'm being a baby. I don't think so. And I think because I'm just like you, I want to protect my account. I'm going to trade micros for the trap. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want to lose $600 or $700 if the news is fantastic and everything works great. So that's what I'm going to do. So here's how you would do it if you want to trade micros. And I don't think it's a bad idea. Okay. So first thing you do is your chart goes to MGC 0824. And like I said, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to remove my trade. I'm going to right click the chart. I'm going to click on trap trade. Okay. We have a stop up at the top. I'm going to make my stop 35. It's not very expensive to trade micro gold. So that's one change I'm going to make. Just a little bit bigger stop. It'll give us a little more flexibility, but I'm going to use the same tiers. All right. Those tiers are pretty big, 55 and 70. It seems pretty reasonable to me. Every trade has survived the initial news release. Okay. Every trade has survived the initial news release. Now, I apologize. The stop is 20. The stop is 20. So I'm going to do 30 on my MGC, 55 and 70 on my tiers. But I think it makes total sense because I'm just concerned about the news. If the news is fantastic, you could just get a great, great burst. So that's my worry about the trap trade. Normally, I don't worry that much, but it's such an important report. So I'm just labeling it MGC trap. So tier 1 is 55, tier 2 is 70. Time of the event for everybody out there is 8:30. Okay. Don't pay attention to me. I'm using a slightly different version of the software. I do my time differently. And you have prep activation seconds. That should be 5 seconds. 5. Okay. And that's what I'm trading in my regular account. That's the trap trade. Apply it and okay it. All right. In our Fuelnox account, let me enable my trap. Don't forget on your chart with the trap trade, on your chart at the top, make sure your chart is wide enough. Okay, wide enough. So you see all your buttons. The final button you should see is the combine button. Okay, the combine button. You have the break even button, close the outer tier. Sorry, close the trade. Break even, close the trade, adjust we don't use, cancel the outer tier, combine. Okay. Now, don't worry about gold volatility. The gold market opens at 820. It should move a little bit. Then in our Buellnox account, I'm going to trade our YM setup, recognizing it's risky. It's a breakout, 829.58. The bracket is 30. We have 2 positions. Position 1 is a 1, position 2 is a 1. The first target is 20. The second target is 40. If it hits my first target with target 1 stop move, I'm going to move to break even. And the stop loss is 70. I'm going to use 45. My testing showed that if the report's good, not going to need a 70 tick stop. There was one event where a 70 was needed. But I found in my testing, it didn't work anyway. So I'd rather normally I never change our stop like that, but I do feel that the 45 is just as safe. And then I'm going to label it YM. And I'm going to trade that in Buellnox. I want to look at my brackets. And there have been, some issues of getting good fills in the prop accounts when the market really, really moves fast. And there's been some issues with liquidity on these high volatility reports. So it's nobody's fault if you don't get filled. Okay. If liquidity dries up right before the news comes out, there's nothing you can do to get a fill if the market isn't going to fill you. It's not your fault if something like that happens. It's nobody's fault. Okay. We didn't get filled on our CPI yesterday. And quite a few people did get filled on their CPI and had really nice trades. Just making sure I put my time back. Okay. And then I do have an ES, you can't, it's almost impossible to concentrate on three things, two setups. I mean, honestly, I was thinking yesterday that, trading two setups, it does a disservice sometimes because you can't concentrate. You can't concentrate on both setups all the time. How do you input to break even? Arthur, you just use the target one stop move and type capital BE. And if your first target gets hit, the stop automatically moves to break even. Okay. On my ES settings, Frank, I want to be totally clear. I'm just setting up a reversal trade on it. And when I set up a reversal trade on an instrument that we haven't really tested, we've done breakouts. The way that I'm doing it, I'm just putting a decent amount. Look, we know this report can move a lot. So I'm going to put 25 ticks as a target, 20 ticks as a stop. That's a fair. I'm using MES. So, I would use, if I use MES, then I would use, say, 15 ticks as a first target, 30 ticks as a second target, 25 ticks as a stop. And it's not like I've tested, it could move well more than 30 ticks on the ES. What I'm looking for on the reversal or the continuation is just if it gets to any levels and or if I have time to even do the trade. Okay. With two setups, I might not have time to pay it proper attention. So I'm setting that up in my Buell-Knox. When you enable that reversal trade, you get your buttons instant long, instant short. If it's going to probably burst above the high of the day, if it's a real positive report, it might go to the low of the day PP, right, in this area. And that might be an interesting area for a long. Okay. So that's what I'm looking for, Frank. I'm looking for levels where price might change direction. Okay. That's what I'm looking for. So check your time sync, everyone, by going to the website. Time is. Okay. Don't forget, check your time sync. Normally I don't worry that much about trading full size. I pretty rarely trade micros when our trap trade is set for full size. I just feel a lot of risk on this report today. Just a concern that the trap can just blow through the tiers. Okay, is everybody good with the setups? Everybody clear? So just to review, the middle chart is the YM in our Fuel Knox account. Our trap trade on micros is on the left chart. And then MES, possible after the news, depending what happens here. Okay. I guess everybody's anticipation today is good news. So, maybe it's baked in because of yesterday. Maybe, and don't forget, you got unemployment too. The Fed's looking at those jobless claims. They're expecting 225. If the jobless claims are above that, that will be considered good news. Okay. If they're a lot below that, that would be considered bad news. And then on inflation, of course, if the inflation, the producer price index is higher than expected, that'll be considered bad news. Oftentimes, when there's bad news, gold can go down. Oftentimes, when there's good news, we see gold go up. A lot of gold's movement as of late, though, is gold sometimes has been moving with the market. It never used to do. I hate to use the word never. It rarely did that years ago. It didn't. It was an opposite. Like bonds are often an opposite trader. Market goes up, bonds can go down. But everything since the pandemic, relationships have never been quite back to normal. The pandemic has thrown everything out of whack in a lot of ways. And I don't think societies are still recovered from the pandemic. People are still getting pretty sick from COVID. Nobody likes to admit it, but COVID is not gone. It's still around. People still die from it. We just want to ignore it. We choose to ignore it. Until you get it, then you can't ignore it. All right, we've got a minute. All right, so Fuel Knox in the middle, YM breakout, trap trade on the left. Now, interesting thing about a trap trade, we have a big tier. We have a 50 tier. So if there's pre-trade volatility, probably not going to worry. You don't have to worry about getting filled early. Orders should show up now. There's the orders. Shrink your chart if you can't see your orders. Okay, exactly what I was worried about with the YM. Not a good result. Now the trap, and exactly what I was worried about with the trap trade, not working. Exactly my fears about everything. And that's why I chose to do what I did where I did it. Now, what's frustrating is the news. The jobless claims are worse than expected. That's good news. The PPI is lower than expected. All good news, but we did not, well, we got a gold move that would have blown through full size trap. And that is exactly why I did not want to trade it. The YM just did a whippy, goofy kind of move that concerned me from the testing. And that's why I was willing to do it in my prop account. I didn't want to lose cash on that YM move. Now the ES created a high. So, you're looking at good news though. So the question is, I didn't get in. I wouldn't have gotten in at that high. I don't know that the ES was done creating that high or not. The concern here is the news to me looks like it's good news. I don't see any bad news in that report. Now, gold is still pushing up. Now, John, you're saying your YM breakout worked. Is that what you're saying? But I'm assuming you didn't trade it the same way that I did. So I would not have taken, um, I wouldn't have chased that short on the ES. I did not want to chase that short on the ES. I'm just looking at the results on a variety of different calendars. Month over month is negative 2.2 versus 2.5 year over year. Definitely looks like good PPI news all the way. I'm just watching the ES here. I'm not interested in a short, I don't think, because I do think the news is good. It's almost 4 minutes after the report. So I'm just watching here. I don't have, for me, I'm not going to take another trade. I'm not taking another trade. Let's look at the video. Two seconds here. Okay, so let's look at what happened. Exactly what my concern was on the trap. I just felt that gold, more than anything, definitely worried me that it was going to burst. So just watching gold on the left, exactly what it did is just burst up, did a pretty big pullback at the top of the candle, and then it just kept going up. Just kept going up. And I'm just watching, kept going up, went up even further, even further. So, it was more than 100 ticks, more than 100 ticks. Gold could have been, um, it could have been a breakout today, but we have done the testing. Every now and then a gold breakout works on this report, but it does not work regularly. And then the YM did what I was worried about. And look, I said over and over, I felt that this report is high risk and that you might want to trade it with as low risk as possible. I was not enamored of the YM testing. And it did a whipsaw. It did exactly what my concern was. It whipped. It whipped. And that's why it didn't work. And then just watching what the ES did, we did not have an ES setup, not an official, a breakout. But look at the way the ES went down big time and then it went up. An ES breakout would have been very challenged there, just like the YM, right? It went down a significant amount before it went up. If you look at the ES candle, that wick was all a pretty big move down. So, you would have had to have had a pretty big ES bracket to survive that. And now it's selling off from the high. After you have multiple highs, that certainly is a place where you could consider getting in on the short on a reversal. It failed to break the high multiple times. So in this area, that's a good potential place to reverse, even with the news being so good. Because especially if you're on an MES, your stop is pretty small above that high. All right. I want to thank everybody for watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching, folks. I can't see your question. What is the CPI report? It's PPI today, Producer Price Index, the cost of prices to businesses and manufacturing, production. And if you really want to know exactly what the report is, if you look at the calendar, for instance, and you just click on the event. So if you open up Forex Factory, which is a news calendar, and you look at the event, if you don't know what the event means, you click on the file folder, change in the price of finished goods. Sometimes it doesn't give you a great explanation. And services sold by producers, okay? Finished goods, it affects consumer inflation because the cost of manufacturing, making products is passed on to the consumer. And then if that's not good enough, of course, you can always Google PPI report. All right, everyone, we'll be back. Once again, I want to thank everybody for watching us on YouTube. We're going to close our YouTube stream. So thanks, and we'll be streaming again tomorrow. You can click the notification bell or check your email. We'll be back tomorrow.